you think, well, that one thing answers everything. I don't need to look elsewhere.
Yes.
And the problem is that we're finite creatures surrounded by infinite complexity.
Yep.
So the battlefield is stacked somewhat. The deck is offset against our favor. And if we can constrain down the complexity that we're fighting with, we say, well, we've got this one person and he's got all of the answers. One guy has all of the answers. I don't necessarily...
Sure, and we see it in religion, we see it in politics. One person has got everything, and it can't be true. But you're right. I mean, we're drowning in inputs, and that leads us to a certain kind of remorseless quest for the one input. And I remember there was reading a book. There's a line saying something like, "All of us are going to die with a book half read on our bedside." That may not literally be true, but there's capturing something important there, that our exploration will be unfinished. It's quite daunting. It's very sad thought, that we won't. And of course, the book that we really won't have finished reading is the book of ourselves. We won't have understood more than a share of ourselves. That's very frightening. We'll have, on an average gravestone, it should say, here lies, who half understood who they were. They only half understood. And that's very weird. Like you're on your deathbed and you don't really know who you have been.
Was it Goethe that on his deathbed pronounced, nobody really knows me. I don't really know anybody else. Nobody knows anyone really.
Yeah. So that kind of despair.
Surrounded by friends and family. What a way to cut and call. See you later on.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking on that, do you think it's inevitable for deep thinkers to be more lonely? Is the deep or sensitive thinker kind of fated to have a bit of distance?
It's a ticklish topic, isn't it? Because to say, I'm not doing so well in life. I'm a bit isolated from things because I'm so marvelous. You could go, come on. However, let's face it. Look, it's like, imagine you had a very sophisticated diet and you walk through, we're in London now, you walk through this average street of London. There would be fewer restaurants and eating places and supermarkets that you could go into to get the food that you need because your dietary needs will be quite complicated. There's a version of this around sociability. If you only need to talk about certain things, if you are, I don't know, let's imagine you're Brian Cox. I don't know Brian Cox personally. And you really love interplanetary phenomena. You're not going to meet that many people who will really be able to meet you on those topics. I mean, or even be that interested. They might go, "Oh, Brian, I loved your show, but just
enough with the black holes, mate.
Enough with the black holes." And so he might find himself a little bit lonely. I mean, who knows about his life? I'm sure he's, but
he used to be a rock star. You know that?
Yes.
Yeah. Very cool.
Or imagine if you are, I don't know. Imagine if you were Freud. And Freud was, he had some collaborators, but he also fell out with a lot of them and didn't get on with, lots of people. So one might argue that complexity of mind militates against easily finding
fewer people like you. You're going to have to work harder in order to.
I would say that's fair enough.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
We sort of touched on it earlier on. I think it's maybe worth just revisiting a little bit, the deeper thinker, the more serious person, the earnest person, how can they find more fun, inject a little bit less of that loneliness in? They're in an area where maybe people don't resonate quite so much. They don't have quite so many of the conversations that
Chris,
they need.
Can I answer a slightly different question?
Mm-hmm.
Just because, look, I think it's really important to think that the deep thinker, the earnest person, etc. I don't want us to suggest that there are these people called geniuses wandering around the world, and they're so different from everybody else. I love this quote from Emerson, where he says, "In the minds of geniuses, we find our own neglected thoughts." So key. In the minds of geniuses, we find our own neglected thoughts. I think what he was saying there was, geniuses don't have thoughts that are categorically different from the ones everybody has. What's different is they hold on to them. They look at them. They feel them. You could say in the minds of artists lie feelings that, lie our own neglected feelings. In other words, artists, geniuses, etc., they're just paying more attention to the stuff that's in everybody's mind. It's not that their stuff in their mind is completely radically different, which is why often when you hear a great song or a great piece of poetry or whatever, or read a great book, sometimes you think, I kind of knew that was already in me, that I'm merely being put back in touch with something that's in me already. Because what the so-called clever person has done is just pay it more attention. So let's not deify these people. And let's also open up, quickest way to become a genius, pay more attention to your own neglected thoughts.
I'm interested, having followed your work for a very, very long time, and it's been one of the most reliably influential things, I think, on my intellectual journey. So I want to thank you for parasocially guiding me through an awful lot of situations. I'd like to say that I remind myself of your work when things are good, but it does tend to be the sort of thing that I go to when I need a little bit more guidance. But I'm interested in what drives you, the sort of primary motivating forces that are behind your studies and sort of thinking over the years.
So it's brutally and horribly simple. Just to help me get through the day. It is extremely personal and motivated entirely by, a desire for self-help. If it helps anybody else, I mean, people sometimes say things like, gosh, you must have studied a lot. How did you know that about me? And I'm like, frankly, I have no clue. I was just doing my stuff. And it's beautiful and lovely that it should echo in somebody else. But that's not how I started. It started always with me. And, I became a writer. I wrote my first book when I was 22, and it was not, it grew out of writing a diary. It grew out of trying to solve my own confusions. It was a way of trying to stay afloat emotionally, psychically. And it had nothing to do with a career in that sense. Later on became some of the accoutrements of a career. But as I say, it began, and it still is to this day, an emotional necessity, I would say. It's a way of coping. I'm an intellectual, not a sort of fancy thing, but I'm an intellectual in the sense that I intellectualize pain. If something horrible happens, my immediate impulse, not to jog or drink or do all sorts of things people do, but it's to try and think about, well, what is this thing? What lesson is there here? And that lesson is being fished out for me. If it helps anybody else, fantastic. But I do it anyway. That's how I operate.
I've found an odd resonance with what I've done with the show as well. In many ways, there is a temptation to do what may be popular or trendy or accumulate the most exposure or status or make you look good. And that's always there. And neither of us are immune to those incentives. But I think one of the reasons that I resonated with your work, and hopefully some microcosm of people resonate with mine, is research very much is me search in this situation. And the fact, you're right, how could you have seen the human experience has been really sort of shown to me that it's like you've turned the mirror around on myself. Like it's almost like you're speaking to me. It's, well, because there's broad buckets of people that sort of fall into similar kind of cohorts, and it would appear that perhaps me and you are in a non too dissimilar cohort. And this, I think, is a reason for confidence in our own work and in listening to our instincts, rather than trying to work out what the market, the audience, the reader wants. Just saying, okay, well, what would be useful to me right now? What would have been useful to me previously? Especially given the fact that the thing you need to hear right now is probably the thing that you would tell yourself 10 years ago. So it's the same lessons over and over. It's looking at that circle. And I think it is the best justification for selfishly following your instincts when it comes to an intellectual investigation of yourself, of the world around you. Because if you think a thing, if you feel a thing, if you're challenged with a particular issue, it's probably reliable that some non-insignificant
Absolutely.
majority, perhaps, of other people are
100%.
feeling the same. How fucking narcissistic do you need to be to
think that we're the only one?
me?
Yeah.
Me. This is a
Because that's too mean. That's too mean, because we don't think of it nastily. We think of it shamefully. We think, I've been singled out for particularly
personal
painful.
curse.
Yeah, we don't think I'm so great and I'm alone. We
No,
think,
no.
oh God, I've been cursed.
I'm broken.
Yeah, I'm uniquely broken. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's so important to bear that in mind. By the time you're feeling it, other people will be feeling it too. And it's so hard to hold on to that thought because frankly, because we see no visible evidence of it. We don't see people talking about it in our vicinity. In the 100 people we know and move around, no one's talking about it openly. They're feeling it, but they don't talk about it. And so we have to hold our nerve. And there's a lesson here about capitalism here and business, which is fascinating. I mean, it's not naturally the area I fall into more. You've talked a lot about this, but so many great businesses start precisely like this, that somebody thinks there's this thing I really want and need or that thrills me, and it sounds quite weird to everybody else, and the person just sticks with it and just has a hunch about it. Just as many business failures are all about someone doing something, and then if you say to them, do you want this? Would you buy this thing? And then they go, oh, actually, no, I wouldn't. So why are you making it for somebody else if it's got no resonance with you? Careful. The biggest business disasters are people making stuff that they haven't asked themselves, would I really want this?
Yes. The word grift is thrown around on the internet a lot. And I've asked people to define it. This person is grifting or shilling for a particular product or company or ideology, whatever it might be. And I asked the best definition that I've ever heard, one that I actually accept. I don't like the word because I think it gets pattern matched incorrectly almost all the time. But the best definition is somebody promoting something that they themselves would not use or believe.
Right.
I think,
and
that's good.
And there's an intellectual version of that. When someone reads a book, etc., and they've lost touch, and they're spouting Kant or Hegel or Wittgenstein or whatever it may be, or attachment theory, and it's not fitting them, and therefore there's something wrong. But I think many hours ago now we began in this place, which is how difficult it is to hone that authentic muscle where you feel something, you hold on to it, you think no one else is talking about it, but let me stay with that because I think it's a thing for me. So it may be a thing for somebody else, even though no one's mentioning it. It takes a lot of courage.
How much better have you become at understanding yourself over the years? How much have you been able to nudge those fundamental physics of your system?
I've made some progress. Yeah, definitely made some progress. And I'd say that I understand myself more than I've been able to change myself. And one could go, oh, so nothing's really changed. Well, understanding is a thing as well. That is its own legitimate thing. Do I always make wise choices now? Am I always no? But I do understand things better. Yes, I think I've also better understanding my unconscious, and by that I mean it's also what people call their gut instinct. I do think that there are things we know without fully knowing why we know them or how we know them, and to allow a little bit more for that slightly mysterious form of knowing. We're talking about sentence completion exercises where you're completing a sentence, you're letting something bubble up from your unconscious. I try and do that more and more. But I ask myself simple questions like, what am I really feeling here? Don't overthink this. What's really going on? You've met this person. What do you really feel around them? Just say it. Say it to yourself. Don't, what do you feel? And then holding on to that something quite important has gone on there, that your answer captures something that a more thought-laden answer might not. And trusting that a bit more. In love, in work, in friendship, in areas of daily life.
I would say that one of the biggest contributions, at least that I've seen from your work, for me personally, is that stark assessment of the human condition, a very sanguine, some would say British, slightly self-deprecating, honest admission of how flawed, how insane, how irrational, how silly, shameful we can be a lot of the time. And yourself, Oliver Berkman, if you're familiar with Oliver as well.
Yeah.
Again, sort of really embracing that British melancholic sort of tragedy well handled type thing.
Yeah.
This has been a very long time coming. I've wanted you on the podcast since before I began it. I went back and looked at my first ever set of notes that I had that has your name in. I'm sure there's stuff that's a little bit earlier than that. And that was 2017.
Oh, wow.
So it's late to the party, perhaps in the broad scheme of things, but very early to the party in my intellectual trajectory. And making people feel less alone in the challenges that they face, the day-to-day machinations, this personal curse that, I didn't know anybody else felt like that. At least it's not just me.
Yeah.
At least I've not had this thing sort of thrown down on me from above. And I definitely, when I find myself embracing that with the show, with the content that I create, with the thoughts that I have, with the way that I try to direct things, with the way that I try to push people forward, especially at my age, I'm 36, and there's a number of different directions that I can kind of go down. And the one that's pulling me the most at the moment is a much more stark assessment of the silliness and irrationality and shamefulness of the human condition. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for helping to be a role model for me to be able to do that more.
Thank you so much, Chris. Lovely words. So generous. Thank you.